Now, study and discussion questions for Rediscovering America, the Frontier. According to the Census Bureau, how many inhabitants constituted a frontier area during the 19th century? What 1862 government act opened the American West to large-scale settlement? Discuss the role that the railroads played in the westward movement of the 19th century. Could the frontier have been settled without them? Assignment Discovery now presents Rediscovering America, the Frontier.
I'm Roger Kennedy at about 12,000 feet in the Colorado Rockies at Ute Pass. This is the Continental Divide, the edge of what Thomas Jefferson bought for the nation with the Louisiana Purchase. It's the edge of a lot of things. It's the kind of place we Americans tend to think of when we use our favorite word, the frontier. Of course, the frontier isn't a place. It's an idea of immense mountains and immense deserts and incommensurable skies and immense opportunity, possibility, hope. But it was also wish fulfillment for the literary. It was riches for the miners and titillation for tourists, a cluster of incompatibilities, manifest destiny and tribal survival.
The frontier for European Americans was the Native Americans' home. In 1893, the historian Frederick Jackson Turner defined the frontier as opportunity in the form of land, and he was right.
I'm Roger Kennedy. For Europeans, the ownership of a piece of land has been the aspiration of every toiler in the fields and every sweating townsman. America for Europeans meant land of your own. It didn't mean that for Native Americans who dwelt upon the land, who fought to defend it from other tribes, but not land for them. For them, land wasn't loot, it was space for living, a frontier lost.
In 1803, after purchasing the Louisiana Territory, Thomas Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark up the Missouri River. Jefferson had an imperial vision for America, stretching to the Pacific. To secure his objective, Lewis and Clark were instructed to cultivate friendly relations with the Indians.
Meriwether Lewis, 27 October 1804. I walked up and smoked a pipe with the chiefs of the village. They were anxious that I would stay and eat with them. My indisposition prevented my eating, which displeased them, until a full explanation took place. I returned to the boat and sent 2 carrots of tobacco for them to smoke, and proceeded on.
Lewis and Clark spent their first winter with the Mandan Indians. Carl Whitman, a former tribal chairman, is a descendant of those people. Members of his tribe speak to us in a setting recreated much as it was for Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark came by Forebear, who was a chief at that time, and told his people to take good care of him and give them whatever they wanted. And see, the Mandan culture is, as a matter of fact, generally the Indians' culture is based upon generosity. They didn't give for gains. It did establish their status in their society. A white man establish a status in his society by what he accumulates, but the Indian is by what he gives away. So usually a chief was not always the richest man, he's usually the poorest man because he could take care of his people.
Indians had their own ideas of the frontier, as they do of a chief.
Frontier is a word that's invented by the white man. Well, I think it's always kind of a unilateral decisions about the marching on. When they wanted land, why the Indians gave it.
Even before Lewis and Clark's expedition, British, French, Russian, and American trappers worked the territory west of the Mississippi, following Indian trails to the northwest, to Oregon, California, and the Southwest. Then came miners between 1849 and 1875, transcontinental railroads, and finally, millions of farmers at the end of the 19th century. In 90 years, Thomas Jefferson's goal to create a nation from sea to sea was realized. The frontier still exists in both a real and visionary sense for Jim Carrier, a reporter for the Denver Post.
The frontier during the 1800s was a line that crept across the United States. It was defined by the Census Bureau and the number of people who lived on it. More than 2 people per square mile was considered civilized, if you can believe that. Less than that was still frontier, and it was a definable line until about 1890. For the first 150 years of this country, people built up on the east side of the Appalachians, almost to a bursting point. And after the Revolution, they spilled over. And the frontier was upstate New York. It was Tennessee. It became the 100th meridian, the Rocky Mountain front, and then ultimately California and Oregon.
Jim, you travel the West a lot. What has the frontier come to mean to you?
I remember a quote from a Texas ranch woman who said, "Out here, my nearest neighbor is God." To me, it's space. It's an openness. There are many places I drive where I literally feel my spirit opening when I pop over a brow and see a mountain view, or come across a prairie like this and feel that I'm alone. I think what it does, and it may be an illusion, is that it makes me feel like I own it.
Others wanted to own that land in a hard-fisted way. The explorer John Charles Fremont promoted the idea of manifest destiny, destiny to own the West. Seizing the land was not easy. The powerful Sioux nations lived in North and South Dakota, Nebraska, and parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Canada. They were there, and they intended to stay there. Jody Lugar, a Lakota Sioux, lives in Fort Yates, North Dakota. His people are known as great horsemen and musicians as well as warriors.
I still have a sense of belonging to the land. I've been all over the world, and I always come back to my home here because of the sense of security, the sense of my ancestors being here, the sense of belonging, and the sense of relating to this land in a spiritual way. And I'm not unique in that capacity at all. Ooh, son. Easy, boy. The Indian Wars were started because of the non-Indian wanting land, wanting Lakota land that we couldn't figure out how a person could own land in the first place, because we didn't think in terms of owning land. We thought in terms of defining a territory, but not of owning the land. And so this is what started the so-called Indian Wars. European culture is interested in logical, linear things. If it isn't logical, then we're not really interested in pursuing that on a daily basis. And if that logic as an outcome doesn't generate money, well, then it's not worth spending time with. On the other hand, natives rely on their intuition and their visions to direct their daily life, with a spiritual outcome as being the goal.
George Catlin. Nature has nowhere presented more beautiful and lovely scenes than those of the vast prairies of the West, and of man and beast no nobler specimens than those who inhabit them, the Indian and the buffalo, joint and original tenants of the soil, and fugitives together from the approach of civilized man.
Beaver ponds were the first frontier for the Europeans, from the Catskills and the Adirondacks to the flanks of the Rockies. The French were here in the 1740s and 50s, and that's how Lewis and Clark knew where they were going. They were using French maps drawn 60 years earlier. After Lewis and Clark came hordes of American fur traders making fortunes for people like John Jacob Astor,
the German-born financial genius who organized the American Fur Company in 1808. But for trappers like Kit Carson, Jedediah Smith, and Jeremiah Johnson, it was a life of hardship and adventure. Ed Maddox and Dan Duder are trappers themselves and living history interpreters here at Fort Uncompahgre, a restored 19th century trading station in Delta, Colorado.
Mountain men were probably just as individual as the people that are out here today. There were all different kinds, all different races, and all different colors. There were a lot of Indian mountain men that came from back east. Then in this area, you had a lot of Mexican trappers. Also, you had a few black mountain men, so they came from all different backgrounds. There were some that were out here, you know, to get away from a life that they didn't like back in the east, and others came just for the sheer adventure of it. Take your traps to the Rockies, set them down anywhere you can catch beavers overnight, man, you'll get rich. A lot of times there'd be 3 men working a camp, 2 trappers, 1 camp keeper. Your trappers bring them in, the camp keeper skins them, stretches the hides. It's a tough process, even for the trappers. You're out there in that cold water every day, and within a few years they said that even a young man looked like he was 60 years old because of the cold, and that's how it affected him.
Lower out. I think that'll work.
Lower out, stretching in.
Yep, that'll work.
That'll work out really good.
Average lifespan of a mountain man, once he gets the mountains, a little less than 3 years. Out of 116 men from right here in this area, the first year this fort was here, 16 lived and 100 didn't. That's the odds. They died from a lot of different things, but mostly dysentery, chronic diarrhea, things like that. What a way to go, you know? And there goes the romance. You know, he didn't get killed by Indians, didn't get killed by bears, he just got sick and died.
After the trappers came the miners. The mining frontier began with Sutter and assay offices and banks and Homestake and Anaconda. But the Indians have been mining a lot longer than that. They had taken copper and lead from Wisconsin and Michigan. They had taken steatite from Georgia and used it in Louisiana. They found wonderful minerals like aragonite in Indiana caves and made pipes from it in Ohio. In Ohio pipestone was used to make wonderful little effigy pipes. There was the great turquoise trade in the Southwest and the salt trade in the Ozarks. But when the Europeans came, it all changed. The things you took were no longer valued for themselves, but for the things you could buy with them. And when the Europeans arrived, mining became big business, and the lure of precious metals produced a mining rush into the Rocky Mountain West. The magic lure of gold brought tens of thousands of people west to California's highlands, Nevada's deserts, and Colorado's mountains. They came to Colorado in 1859 after gold was found here in Clear Creek. Gold fever still infests the Rockies.
It's a fever, basically, is what it boils down to. It's a fever that consumes you. You want to be out there all the time, looking for gold and looking for gold. And the more gold you got, the more you want.
The Argo Gold Mill, now run as a tourist attraction by a miner, Darrell Chauncey, was the very heart of the Colorado Gold Rush. Once nicknamed Thunder in the Mountain, its noise shook the earth as it stamped and separated, ground and classified, crushed a amalgamated, culled, skimmed, and leached the precious ore from 800 mines. Precious metals produced great family fortunes, like that of the Tabors of Colorado, but few of those fortunes lasted very long.
If it wasn't for the fact that there were people out here finding gold, finding their family fortunes, it would not have been developed the way it is today. It was the lure. It was what brought people out here. This took me between 3 and 4 hours to actually pull this out of the creek that I found this in. So it's there. This right here is worth about $4,000. So is $4,000 and 4 hours work worth it? Yes, I'd say so. Also, you'll find things like this in the creeks. These are nuggets. I've been very fortunate in this. It took me 12 years to find this vein, to find these nuggets, and to find this amount of gold that I'm finding. You're not going to get rich overnight. You will have to put a lot of time and effort into it. The one guarantee that you have in mining is if you don't go looking, you ain't going to find it.
In 50 years, beginning with the California rush of 1849, people rushed around the world after gold. Miners raced from California to Colorado, to the Yukon, South Africa, and to Australia. These hills were once crawling with miners from Wales, England, Italy, Germany, and Czechoslovakia.
Miner, 1848. The whole country resounds with a sordid cry of gold. Gold, gold. Well, the field is left half planted, the house half built, and everything neglected but the manufacture of shovels and pickaxes.
It was 1862, the year of the Homestead Act, and the rush was on. Between 1870 and 1890, millions of farmers raced westward to occupy the land. Trails of the first wagon trains, like those of the traders and miners before them, then became the roads of the iron horse. Great stretches of the immigrant frontier were controlled by the railroads.
The railroads were the nation's first truly big business, laying tens of thousands of miles of steel rails across the West, perforating the frontier, extending the frontier, and then penning in the frontier with the barbed wire brought by settlers, themselves brought here by the most successful and beguiling advertising campaign in history.
The railroads filled in the details of the vision of the farm frontier with posters to make Madison Avenue blush.
Railroad advertising, through poster art, employed some of the best-known painters of the West to depict Western glories. Painters, as promoters, brought settlers, and in some instances, like the creation by the Santa Fe Road of what we still call the Tao style, bringing a brand new way of envisaging the West itself.
The frontier is an amalgam of visions, none of them more enduring than those of the Native Americans. For many of the Indians, an understanding of the land and a sense of self are connected.
It was taught to us that a man is divided into 4 equal parts. Those parts being the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual aspects, and that can be symbolized by the medicine wheel. And if we neglect any one of those parts, then we get out of balance. And in order to get back in balance, we have to find what area that we're not identifying with, that we're not growing in. We not only have to identify ourselves in those 4 areas our ancestors taught us, but it's also our right and our responsibility to grow in those 4 areas. So if we get stagnant in any of those areas, we get out of balance. And that relates to being a happy individual, I guess, something that all people are striving for. When I think of frontier, I don't think of miners or cowboys or railroads or the rush, gold rushes or anything like that. When I think of the frontier, I think of my ancestors chasing buffalo, and hunting and doing the jobs and living in the culture and the society that they lived in at that time. There were 60 million buffalo here and 10 million people during the time that I consider the frontier. And what that says to me is that this land and the people that were on it were in total balance. I think in comparison, we're a lot further out of balance than those particular people were at that time. So I think we could learn a very valuable ecological lesson from those people and how they related to and reacted to the land.
What is going on in the West now is some of the last great land battles over how we use our lands, particularly the public lands. And there are many people in the West who have been loggers or miners or farmers who think that those issues ought to be decided locally. My sense is that all of these land issues are national issues, because as you decide these, what it really is a crusade. It's really a battle for the American soul.
From all sides we have come, immigrants everyone, both to take and to give, people learning to live.
The frontier is, and always has been, the land, fought over, dreamed about, sowed, tended, mined, and explored. But as a vision, it has never closed. It's always there.
Let the spirit come forth.
Why have we Americans been so obsessed with the loss of a frontier? Why do we keep seeking new circumstances to describe as a frontier? Space or technology or thought? Other people don't talk that way about frontiers. Maybe, though, because the land is still there, we still long for a geography of freedom, for the unencumbered life, for escape from civilization. But also, surely because we cling to the idea of a fresh start and a new chance and absolution by doing it better this time. Maybe because the land is still there, we mean to try to do better this time by the American land.
With the rain and the sun, in the soil we are one. There our hope deep is found, seeds of love in the ground. Grasses grow, rivers flow, grasses grow, rivers flow, grasses grow, rivers flow.
Coming up now, answers to study questions for Rediscovering America, the Frontier. According to the Census Bureau, less than 2 people per square mile constituted a frontier area. The Homestead Act promised cheap land to settlers, and as a result, many Americans moved west. Try this activity with your class. On a blank map of the United States, draw the frontier lines for 1763, 1783, 1803, 1850, 1880, and 1900. Discuss the implications of each change. To learn more, members of the American Association of School Librarians and Assignment Discovery suggest The American Frontier, Opposing Viewpoints, edited by Mary Ellen Jones. Ask your librarian to help you explore the many resources your library has to offer.